57 Ghana cedis. That was what Ghana's Supreme Court in June 2026 decided a single day on death row was worth for a man who spent 24 years there for a murder he was acquitted of. To understand how he got there, we have to go back to Tamale in March 2001, when a young trader named Abu Shaibu stood in a courtroom and heard a court declare him guilty. The charges were murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence against him was circumstantial and of the kind that could point to guilt or just as easily point to innocence, but the court still found him guilty. And because Ghana's death penalty was still in force, Abu Shaibu was sentenced to die. Abu would indicate later that he was called Amin, the trusted one, that he was a man who led prayers because the community believed in his character, and the same community watched him being led into a cell on death row where he was going to be executed. Days became months and months became years, and 21 years passed. The world moved on without him, and his name faded, and his reputation was gradually dissolved into whispers and doubt. Finally, decades later, Abu took action. He asked the courts to permit him to appeal his case, and remarkably he got it. The Court of Appeal looked at the evidence that had put him in death row and saw exactly what should have been seen the first time. He was not firm and was capable of pointing in more than one direction. The conviction fell. His appeal was successful. After nearly 24 years living under the shadow of death, Abu Shaibu walked free. The court certified in writing that Abu deserved compensation for what the state had taken him through. Armed with that certificate, Abu walked into the Supreme Court of Ghana with a claim. He requested 2,864 Ghana cedis. For him, every pesewa represented a wound, 800,000 for 24 years on death row and the trauma that would never leave him, 864,000 for lost income as a trader, 400,000 for the friendships he had lost, and the stigma of walking free as an ex-convict, 200,000 simply because he could no longer lead prayers, and because the trust that had earned him the name Amin had disappeared, and more still for a reputation he now had to build from nothing, and for jobs that he could no longer get, for business rivals who had moved ahead while he sat in a cell waiting to die for something that he really didn't do. The state pushed back, and the Attorney General argued that yes, he deserved something and nobody could deny that, but 2.8 million was excessive. 500,000 was enough, and it raised something that Amin could not answer. Abu had no proof of what he had actually earned as a trader before his arrest. There were no records and receipts, just his word. The state insisted that the focus should be narrow on the loss of liberty alone and nothing more. So, the matter landed squarely before the Supreme Court of Ghana. Under the Constitution, if a state could imprison a person, then it has to be prepared to compensate them when the imprisonment turns out to be wrongful. And this is some form of restorative justice. However, it is not automatic. It is discretionary, and that discretion had to be earned. The court laid down certain questions it had to ask. Does a record show conclusively that the man never committed the crime? Had the state used its coercive power to prosecute him without just cause? Had there been a miscarriage of justice, the kind where the trial court itself lacked a proper foundation? There was no way to restore Abu Shaibu to the man he had been in 2001 before he was taken. So the court did a theoretical way to arrive at a figure that was fair without bankrupting the public purse. It considered the gravity of the sentence, a death sentence, the harshest punishment the law could impose, and it considered the length of the incarceration, weighing it against other cases where far fewer years had still attracted a substantial compensation. It considered the social stigma, the reputation, and the loss of standing in his community. And it considered the state's obligation to be just without becoming reckless with public money. In the end, the court agreed with the state. 500,000 cedis, another 2.8 million he was claiming. His business losses were never really proven, and his 21 years of silence before pursuing appeal was entirely his fault. The court valued his years, but not on his terms. 500,000 cedis, spread across 24 years, came to over just 20,000 cedis a year, less than 2,000 cedis a month, and 57 cedis a day. That was the price Ghana's highest court placed on each day a man spent waiting to be executed for a murder he did not commit. It is a brutal number, but it is also a number that must be contextualized, because for 21 of those 24 years, Abu Shaibu had a right to appeal, but did not use it. This is the biggest lesson from this case. He delayed for 21 years before bringing his appeal. And while that did not erase his right to compensation, it shaped how the court viewed his conduct and perhaps contributed to the court siding with the state's lower figure rather than his own. What do you think? Follow Super Law GH Studios for more real stories, real cases, real people.